So to start us off, we're going to use an example case. And this slide and the next slide cover that sample case. So what I want you to do is take a moment. You don't have to freeze your screen unless you fall behind. And I want you to read this slide and the next slide so that you have some background to know what it is we're going to be looking for as we start our research process. Okay, here we go. All right, we're back in Checkpoint. And like most tax services, tax law databases are generally organized in two ways. And the first is known as annotated. And annotated means that it is going to be presented in Internal Revenue Code section order. And that can be varied with topical, which comes to us in topical order. So, for example, the Federal Tax Coordinator, that is a topically organized secondary source, whereas the United States Tax Reporter is organized in an annotated fashion, which means by Internal Revenue Code section. So new researchers usually not too keen on annotated because they simply don't know the Internal Revenue Code well enough to find their way around. So what most people do is, especially in the age of Google, you just go up to the keyword search, right? Because pretty much everything you need is in the keyword search. But let's take a quick look at what's up here so that you know how to get back. So first off, practice areas are the different sets of databases you can search within Checkpoint. And our subscription here at San Diego State really is only robust with respect to federal and state and local. And we're not going to do a state and local example, but we have state tax law and some city tax law and county tax law, that sort of thing, for all 50 states plus the District of Columbia within our subscription. We're largely going to stick to the federal area in this entire video. A couple other things, you can see the tabs up here. We're on the search tab. table of contents, there's news, there's some interesting tools like calculators that you can use within the product. Home, believe it or not, is a page that most researchers don't use very often. It's an entry point into the system, but I have the home page set up, or the default page set up, for when users come into the system as the search page, because that's where most of the work is done. Okay, so we talked about primary source materials versus editorial materials, and you want to be careful because, as I mentioned, you want to make sure you pick the right databases to search in each time you use it. And again, the default that seems to be hardwired into the system is a handful of primary source materials. So if that's not what you're searching, click that off, and a state of Hubble. And it could be that maybe the cache on some other computers around campus don't have that. So we talked about the three main editorial, Fed Tax Coordinator, Fed Tax Handbook, U.S. Tax Reporter. So the Fed Tax Coordinator is the Cadillac version of editorial analysis. So it's the most complete, it's the most comprehensive, it's the most detailed, but as a result, it's also one of the more complex. The least is the Federal Tax Handbook. That's the briefest, it's the easiest to find your way around, but it often doesn't cover the entirety of the tax law. And then in between is the U.S. Tax Reporter. And again, because the U.S. Tax Reporter is structured as an annotated source, meaning in code section order, a lot of new users don't find that particularly friendly and veer away. But I can tell you, as you get more comfortable with it, you'll find it's a pretty cool tool as well. Okay, so let's say we want to do a keyword search, right? And we are used to the world of Google, like I've said before. There's a couple choices up here, and intuitive search is what we're mostly used to. So that's put in anything, phrase it as a question if you want, like Jeopardy, it doesn't matter. And Checkpoint will do its best job to decipher what it is you're trying to find and go out and find your results. Terms and connectors is a bit of a throwback to the old days. Terms and connectors uses the Boolean connectors and or if, within paragraph, within sentence, and as you expand your ability to search the database, you may find terms and connectors is actually a bit more efficient, but certainly early on, intuitive search is the way to go. So recall our case for looking for our answer for the Colberts, and why don't we put in what is the tax treatment of a child's income? Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking for in that case, is we need to figure out what we're going to do with Stephen's income. So just as a test, you can see I did not select any sources, and so it's going to tell me that I have to select at least some sources. So let's go in and select my favorite, which is the Fed Tax Coordinator. As I said, the biggest and the most detailed. Okay, so for this search, I want to select the Fed Tax Coordinator, the Fed Tax Handbook, and the U.S. Tax Reporter. So we're going to choose the three primary, I got to stop using that term, the three most important secondary sources to search. Okay, so you can see that our results are listed by source list. So these are the three sources that I've searched. If I want to see what's inside any one of those, I can expand it. What it does is it shows the three most important because these have been organized by relevance. And this star over here on the left means that that source might have the most relevant information. So it will show you all three in that one. It will show you, the top three in that one. You can certainly display all the documents from any of those sources at any time, or you can click all documents. Okay, so now it's showing all the documents mixed up. They're sorted by relevance. You can also sort by table of contents, which is kind of going to put it back in the order it was. So the table of contents pretends like each database is a book. And so now it's sorted within each book by the table of contents. So all the first number of hits would be out of one source. The next would be out of the next source, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's go back to source list, because this is the default and this is what you're normally going to see. Okay, you can see we have 97 results and 73 in the Fed Tax Coordinator alone. There's a couple things you can do here. The first is you can search within results if you'd like to. That's one way of dealing with it, and that would allow you to scope your search down a little bit. So the other thing we could think about is improving our keyword search, right? So we asked this as a simple question, but we're searching a tax database. What value is the word tax bringing to our search? I mean, tax is in everything, right? What about the word what? What is that assisting us in our search? And so another thing we could do is try to scope this down. So let's say, for example, we're going to go back to our search and change it and say, look, instead of looking for some of those nonsense terms, why don't I just look up treatment, child, and income? And now I can use a terms and connectors type search. So now it's going to go search for those particular terms. And you know what? I think what I want to do is let's search a primary source this time. So we want to turn off those editorial materials so we can go through and check each one. Alternatively, what I like to do is check the top one and then uncheck it. Okay, so we've organized these in the Internal Revenue Code, and we're down to 43 hits, which is still quite a few, but not too many. And if we just, if we just scroll down our list and look, we might find services of a child, code section 73. Now, finding the magic code section is really awesome when you're a researcher, and it's going to feel really great because it means that you may have located the most critical piece of the tax law that you're looking for. If you've read the chapter on tax research, you should know that the code is the statutory sources of tax law. It's one of the most important, if not the most important. And so finding the code section can be really helpful. One of the problems can be it can be difficult to read the code section. So let's say that this wasn't exactly what I was looking for, and I wanted to go back to my list. There's a few ways. The first is you can navigate by keyword. So if I say navigate by keyword, which is the default, it's going to pop through to each of the next keywords in each of the next documents that I'm flipping through. Another one is by document. So when I switch to by document, it's allowing me to go back and forth between the documents in my list. And then the last one is contents. And that's saying, you know what, I want to look at this like it's a book. And so if I flip forward, the next one should be code section 74, because then numerically in the code, that's the next one. So you can see that those are available in this drop-down. There are also some interesting selections over here. The contents is important because it provides the breadcrumb. It says, hey, here's where you are in case you're wondering. You're in code section 73 of the current Internal Revenue Code. And that can be pretty important if you're a new researcher and you're not sure where you are in the system, because sometimes the secondary sources look and feel like the primary sources, but we're not allowed to rely on secondary sources. So having that breadcrumb can be important. So the other thing you can look at are your links. And we're going to talk about links even more, because you can see that these are links to elsewhere in other databases that have conversations around what's in code section 73. And they're largely mirrored by what is up here in what they call the helper buttons. And do not worry, we're going to spend some time with helper buttons because they are great. So for a new researcher who's trying to understand the code, typically one of the next steps after reading the code section, and let's say you wanted to print the code section as well. You can print this document. My suggestion is let's save some trees for the Lorax's sake and export that document. So you can choose it as a Word document or a PDF. This shows links within the system in the document. I usually say no. Hit export and it's going to create that PDF for you. So code section 73 will be saved to a PDF file that you can print then later if you really need to. The save function does not work, so do not bother with that. I don't know about the email function, but you can always play around with these and see. Our system is set up for a broad number of users that don't all work at the same firm or even within the same class. And so as a result, some of the personalized functions of Checkpoint are not available to us because we don't log in as individual users. We're all kind of the same user logging in all at the same time. Okay, so one of the next steps is usually to go to regs and read the regulations. And you can see what's going to pop up are the regulations. See links, type regulation. And as it turns out, code section 3 has only one regulation. And you can click on that and it's going to take you right to that regulation. Now notice that what's happened is it has created a new tab. And Checkpoint can operate with two tabs typically. And the first one is your kind of your base search. So it's saved that, right? It doesn't close that out. And instead, think of it as creating a secondary tab that has the regulation in it. Notice that some of the features that we saw, right, on the main tab are not available to us. The navigate by, for example, on the secondary tab. The way to fix that is if you hit the maximize button, you can see it's going to replace the main window with this document. So it's going to make this the main window and not save that original main window. So only do that when you're like, okay, I've got 73, I've either exported it or I've saved it or I've written it down or I've made a notation or whatever I need to do before you make the main window. So this regulation has some really good information for us in our sample case, right? So remember, we were trying to figure out what to do with Steven's income that he's generating from his TV services. And it could be we were trying to shift it to his mom, but you can see that compensation for the personal services of a child shall be deemed to be the gross income of the child and not the gross income of the parent. Okay? And that's true for even a minor child. Okay? So you can see that code section 73 is starting to lead us down the path perhaps of where we need to get to. So we're definitely clicking, we're clicking on all cylinders. We have a chance to maybe resolve our issue. So that's a keyword search. Let's go back. I want to go all the way back to where we started. Okay, so here we were. Another way to find something is through the index. Like every book has an index, a lot of these databases have an index. And there's a couple ways to find it, but I think the easiest one is over here under the Go To. And you just click Indexes. And what it's going to do is bring up all the documents within the database that have an index. And you can see not everything has an index. But a lot of them do. The great thing about an index is, of course, that someone else has gone through and done the work of trying to categorize these topics by topic. So I don't have to try to guess through a keyword search what I'm looking for. I could say, no. On the other hand, what I want to do is see if I can look in the index and find what I'm looking for. So Fed Tax Coordinator is one of those items that has an index. It's alphabetical, like you would expect. I can blow that open and go down and look for children. So you can scroll down, and some of these indexes are really long. So another way to do it is Control F and just look for child, right? Well, here's a new one, child actress. Not sure that's on point, but let's take a look. Parents' failure to file a return for a child actress. Not really what we're looking for. But there's a whole section on children or minors, and you can see there are a number that are related to children here. So we're not sure which one to look for. Let's go into children minors, and you can see that, wow, there's even within children minors, there's a lot of items within this index that we might want to look for. So the cool part is you can search an index. You can keyword search an index. So one of the things you might want to do is pick C. And now what you're doing is searching the C for only the C index for what you're looking for. So I could just type in children. And you can see there's still quite a bit there. But at least it's helped me identify where children occur within this index. Okay, so let's go back into the children that we looked at before and see if we can find anything promising. So here's compensation. Let's go look at compensation. So amounts received for services are included in the child's gross income under Section 73. Hey, that's exactly what it is we were looking for. But there's not much here because this is what we'd call an introduction section. So the first thing I want to do is maximize this screen. So I've blown away the previous search efforts that I've made, and I kind of want to see where I am. Okay, right, I'm in the Fed Tax Coordinator, and I'm in section H3180. Which is compensation of minors. So Chapter H is in compensation. Now I have this opportunity, and I do this quite a bit when I research. Let me click around these pages. Let me click through the contents. Remember that I can use this like a book, and if this is the introduction, what's coming up after this? Oh, amounts received for child services are includables in the child's income. Here we go. So here is an editorial or interpretive explanation of this particular topic within the tax code. And you can see that it's not included in the parent's return. Here's a footnote. That footnote is for the regulation we just read. And you can go back and forth between these footnotes, which drag you typically to a primary source of tax law, which again, that's what we have to rely on. So there's even a little blurb here about a baseball player that's involved in a court case. We can even hot link through directly to that court case. So here's the court case, and if you read this court case, you would see that it provides additional detail, and it's very similar to the court case that and it's very similar to the facts that we were looking at in our Colbert case. Okay, so that is searching using the index. Another way to search is through the table of contents. So again, the table of contents is like saying, hey, you know what? I'm just going to look at the table of contents for each of these databases like you would a book. Contents is usually a little better if you have some idea where you're looking. So for example, if I wanted to go into the Federal Library and I wanted to look at editorial materials and the Fed Tax Coordinator, you can see that it's organized by chapter. And look, we're getting a little more familiar with what's going on. I could go into compensation and scroll down, or remember, I could do a search, right? I could say, oh, I'm going to search compensation for children. And it's going to bring us to all the different sections that cover children. There it is again, H3180, compensation of minors. And it picks up, excuse me, it picks up 3181 this time. So you can see that the content search can be super helpful, but really it probably depends to some degree on whether or not you have some familiarity with either the tax law that you're looking for or the database you're looking through. So it's not real common for new users to go through a content search. Now, let's go back to our search page. And let's start the search over, because now I've got a really good idea of what I'm looking at. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I need to go back to code section 73. Well, find by citation is the fastest way to find exactly what you're looking for in the database. If I go into the current code and just search for 73, it's going to bring it right back up. So let's go back just so we understand. Within Find by Citation, I can look up the code in the regs. I can look up court cases by name. So recall that one of the court cases we were looking at was called Allen. Now, Allen's a pretty common name, so you can see there's 586. So I probably wanted to make a better note of the full name of that court case so that I could find it. Or I could find it through its citation, right? So that was 50, whoops, I'm in the wrong one. It was a tax court case. Sorry, 50 TC 466. And of course, I would have exported that document so I could have found it, and here it is. So Find by Citation is when you know what you're looking for. When you know what you're looking for, go right to the citation search and simply find it. Cool, we're almost done. All right, let's go back to our search page again. And I just want to make a couple things crystal clear. The first is don't forget to click either Intuitive or Terms and Connectors, depending on which one you're using. Don't forget to select a database, right? Whatever it is you want to search, make sure you make good choices, because you certainly don't want to give yourself too much to search through. The last thing I want to cover is something that's really great and is a quick shortcut if you want to look at the table of contents, for example, for some of these databases. So let's say that I'm interested in the Internal Revenue Code. You can see that when you drag over a title, a little book appears. And that's like saying, you know what? I want to look at that like it's a separate book. So bring it up. Most of what we do is in normal taxes in this class, and frankly, most of the classes here at State. And so you can search around as things are listed in a book. So we could find the aforementioned code section 73 by continuing to drill down and ultimately find. Okay, so the last thing is, because we have a fixed number of users that can be in the system at one time, and as a result, not everyone can be in there, the system is built to time you out after a certain amount of time. So when you are searching through the database, get a little scratch sheet of paper and make notes as to the documents you are in, because you may turn away for a second. Well, it's more than a second, it's a couple minutes, and the system will have timed you out. And once it's timed you out, you have to start the entire process over again. So you kind of want to have a trail as you go. That's why I'm a big fan of exporting documents to PDF, because that's electronic, just costs me a little bit of memory, and saving them as I find them. So when I found section 73, I'd export it. When I found the regs, I'd export it. When I found the court case, I'd export it. That does two things. First off, if I get timed out, it reminds me where I was because I have the source document. The second thing is it, of course, allows me to then go through and review those supporting documents later and try to fit all the parts together to make it work. Okay, so hopefully you found this helpful. Best of luck with your tax research. Of course, Checkpoint does more, but this is just an overview. I should highlight that if you go to the home page and you go to self-service support, there are a number of training products that are available for free. You can watch a different video. You've grown tired of my voice, perhaps. You can watch their versions. They tend to be a little more built towards the professional and less towards the student, but that's okay. You're going to be a professional someday. So I would encourage you to go through those if you need more help. Be a little bit cautious. Again, as I mentioned previously in this video, we don't log in as individual users, and so some of those functionalities that are available to you as a professional are not available to you here. So just be cautious about that. All right.